Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council study session for Monday, March 25th. We have 4 agenda items on the docket for tonight. Up first for the first 2 items is our Director of Finance, Kevin Engels, here to review first the monthly financial report for December, I believe, or the annual report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We've got 2 reports to look at this evening. We'll start with the preliminary December 2023 financial report, and then I'll pause for questions, and then we'll look at the February 2024 report. So for the general fund, revenues for the year for 2023, we're at 102.7% of the budget, so came in a little bit above budget. A couple of line items here on the revenues I want to point out. Sales and use tax up about 4.7%. Now, if you remove the increase from the ballot measure in 2022, we're basically flat. But overall revenues are about 4.4% above 2022. Expenditures for the year are tracking at 96.5% of the budget. So we came in a little bit under budget on expenditures. A few line items here. Human resources is down 400,000, and you'll see that IT is up about 750. The HR reduction was a transfer of some software costs to IT, so that explains a lot of the IT increase. Also, you'll notice Public Works and Police, the increases there, about $2 million of Public Works is from the sales tax increase for paving of the roads, and about $1 million of the police is also from the sales tax increase. Debt service is down because we paid off the COPs in 2022. This slide shows the expenditures broken down by category. Personnel is up about 14%. That's due to the 5% normal increase and then implementation of the class and compensation study. Capital is always also up significantly. That's, once again, that's the Public Works paving of the roads, about $2 million of that. So if you look at your revenues and expenditures put together, we get operating surplus or deficit. For 23, we're closing out the year at about a $3 million operating surplus. That compares to about $7 million for 2022. You got your transfers. The net transfer out of about $3.3 million. Almost all of that is for capital projects that were approved in the budget. Here's your fund balance breakdown. If you look at that far right-hand column, see we started with $24.1 million. Operations and transfers net out to be a reduction of about $500,000 in fund balance. If you take out your designated and reserve balances, we end the year at just under 10 million, which is almost the same as what we ended 2022 at. So that's it for the December report. I'll pause here for questions, and then we'll start on the February report.
Thank you so much, Director. Member Noonkamp, start us off.
Thank you, Mayor. This may be a question also for the city manager, but I see that we still have about a $500,000 balance from the stadium refund funds. Last time staff had brought that to us, we had asked them to come back with some more ideas. Do we know where that's at?
I'm not immediately remembering. Thanks for the question. I'll be in touch with Christina and our director Underhill and let you know.
That'd be great, just to know when we can spend those down. And then confirming that the LTAR, the later funds, those are, you're just waiting for direction from council if we want to move those into, we don't need that $95,000 balance for any purpose, correct?
We don't have to keep it in there separately restricted if you don't want to.
And if we were to move those funds out and put them towards other projects, would that line item just go away, or do we need to do something?
Unless you wanted to commit it some other way,
Okay.
for a specific project. Otherwise, it would just go into your unassigned fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Member Ward?
To Member Noonenkamp's question, if I recall correctly, that's intended to be spent on the Bellevue Park train, the new electric train.
Yes, the 502,000, I'm sorry, I missed that. Yes, it is. It's dedicated. I believe they're expecting to have delivery in June.
My question is more about the long-term outlook. If I recall correctly, we expected to be drawing down on the unrestricted reserve when we did the budget cycle last year. And it looks like based upon this report, we're ending December this year with a balance that was similar to the balance at the end of 2022. So we actually took in more funds than we expected in 2023. Is that correct?
The two pieces to that, yes, the revenues were up about 4%, and then expenditures were down about 3.5%.
Okay. Is this a trend that we expect to continue into the future, or have we looked at the outlook in the coming years?
Yeah, we actually in a couple of weeks we'll be here with a 5-year projection for you. Yeah, it's we typically underspend a little bit, and that is a trend. Revenues is a little harder to predict. You know,
Okay.
We get one-time items, and we just had a $1 million audit collection. You don't know about those things when you're budgeting necessarily. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
Member Russell?
Thank you. So I do have a comment about the long-term asset reserve. I think there was a council that instituted that for replacement of long-term assets. And can we just do away with it just because we decide we want to?
it would be a council. You would have to take action on it, but yes, you council can.
Okay, but we can't just have you take it out. There has to be a council action.
I believe it would have to be the same type of action that created the fund or the restriction, which probably is at least a resolution.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I just have another comment. When I was reading this, and I also know it's in the next one as well, this is on the second page of the council communication, the first thing under expenditure highlights. It says across all departments, part of the variance is due to a 5% salary increase for all staff, an additional 2% inflationary increase approved by council in June of 2023. The bottom line is I want it to reflect all staff except for the judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Actually, as a point of clarification, didn't we institute the 5% increase also for the judge last year in 2023? City Attorney or City Manager?
Yes, we did during the budget supplemental, the mid-year increase. But the 2024 increase has to be done by separate action according to our council policies.
But since we're talking about 2023, that was instituted as well. So it is correct in terms of all staff.
Yes, the judge received an increase at the beginning of 2023 and also in the middle of 2023.
Thank you so much, City Attorney.
But then it also says the same thing on the next one we're discussing.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Wright and then Member Ward. Oh, sorry. Member Wright and then Member Prang.
Thank you. I had a question on the council communication on the first page under analysis. For the EDDA, are we under a contract to give the EDDA a percentage of the property tax revenue that we receive?
Yes, we are property tax and sales tax. They get a portion.
Okay, then is the EDDA, my question is, and I've had discussions with the city manager before on those sections of the city that they work on. Are they under contract on when and how they are to spend that money, or can they sit on it for X amount of time or as long as they want to? Because it appears to me that it's a nice sum of money that they're receiving. How quickly does this money have to be spent?
I don't recall that anything in the contract specifies when they have to spend it. There are certain things they spend it on, but I don't know about timing.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Member Wright, the City Council does approve their budget each year, and they show that is kind of a reserve that they can spend. I know that, part of the plan is for big projects like Old Hampton Complete Streets, for, something that might happen at City Center. They are trying to build up a reserve to have the funds to be able to, help with those bigger projects. But in terms of their operating and some of the smaller capital projects, those are in the budget that City Council does approve. But we can ask for more detail if you like on the remainder.
Okay. So do they come to council and say, okay, this is what we've done over, and oddly enough, I had this written down already, we received this. Do they come to council and say, okay, over the course of this last year, or quarterly, and say, this is what we've done, so that we know what, is going on, and council and the city is keeping an eye on the projects that they have done?
Yes, they are required to do that once a year, and so we have historically, so far, done that as a study session first, and then they follow that with their budget presentation.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Member Pring?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I noticed on the general fund revenues on page 8, there are, a handful of categories that have a significant increase in revenues. I'm just wondering, could you give us an explanation of the hike in the hotel motel tax? Is that something that fluctuates on a regular basis, or did we have some sort of?
We did have an increase, I believe, in 2021. It can fluctuate, yeah, depending on occupancy.
Okay. We just had a lot more people come into the city
Maybe,
and stay
yeah,
overnight in our hotels during that time
I think
period.
that's about the only thing that could influence that number.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Member Ward?
I just want to respond to Councilwoman Russell's comments about the judge. The municipal judge is not staff. The municipal judge is an elected official. We are elected officials. I also did not get a 5% pay increase last year. There's no reason to call out the municipal judge when we are making reference to staff, because he is an elected official and not staff.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Russell?
Thank you. I'll respond to that in exchange. He is an elected official that we are responsible for his raise, and I will be bringing that up during council members' choice. The other question that I have in response to Member Prang's question, could it be up because of, do short-term rentals get recorded? Do we charge hotel motel tax for them, or no?
I don't think it would be in that category, no. We do, there is a charge, but I don't think it doesn't end up in the hotel motel tax line item.
Okay, do we know where it goes then?
It's most likely it's under licenses and permits.
Okay, and so, City Attorney, do you know what we put in the ordinance about where that money should go?
I don't believe the ordinance says what line item we will apply it to in the budget, but it does say that they are required to pay the tax.
Okay,
And I was just pulling it up.
okay, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Any further questions on the December financial report? All right.
Mayor,
If not, I'm sorry, go ahead, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify for Member Nunez-Camp's question. The train was the majority of that expenditure of the stadium funds, but that was about $400,000. And we used a little bit of the CTF, the Conservation Trust Fund, for that expenditure as well. So we have about $100,000 that's left. And you are correct. We do plan to bring that back to council for what to spend that on. In corresponding with the Parks Department, they were suggesting after the decision on the bond, but we can certainly do that before. That's not till June, so that's a ways out. We're glad to bring that sooner if you like.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. And Mr. Engels, if we want to move to the next agenda item, which is February
Now
report.
we'll take a look at the February 2024 general fund report. Once again, we'll start with revenues. We're at 15.6% of the yearly budget. That compares to 14.3% year-to-date last year. We're up 17.4% overall. A lot of that is in your sales and use tax line item. Just about $1 million of that increase was due to that audit that I mentioned earlier. We closed out one very significant audit earlier this year. You'll also notice that under charges for services, we're up substantially there. That is related to Public Works taking over the former Inglewood Environmental Foundation management of the city center property. Those are the charges that we charge the various members that are part of that common area maintenance. So for expenditures, we're at 14.7% for the year. That compares to 15.6% for last year. Most of the items, variances here are just timing differences. The only one I would point out is under administration. That includes the city clerk. They've taken over operations of the hub for the full year. It wasn't implemented at the beginning of last year. So by category, here's your breakdown. Mostly just inflationary increases. Capital is down. That is a direct correlation to vehicle replacement schedules, so that can fluctuate from year to year. And here's your operating surplus or deficit. For this year, we're running an operating surplus of a little over $500,000. That compares to about $400,000 deficit for 2023 through February. Here are your transfers. Net transfer out of about $4.5 million. That is almost entirely for capital projects that were approved in the budget. And here's your fund balance composition. Once again, that far right-hand column is 2024 year-to-date balances. You'll see the net change of about $4 million. That's directly related to the transfers that we just saw on the previous slide. Once again, removing your designated and reserve amounts, you end up with just under $5 million unassigned fund balance. That's what I have for the presentation for February.
Thank you so much, Director. Any questions on the February report? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. So on the reason in the year-end report, we had almost 10 million, right? Or just over 10 million.
Yes.
Is it because all of those capital expenditures got moved and spent already? Is that why there's only almost 5 million left in the?
Yes, when you approve transfers in the original budget, we do those in January. So those are already out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Member Wright.
Thank you. When I'm looking at, let's say, Area 1 sales tax, and I don't know if that's a good area. I'm sorry. Can we go to Area 5, please?
5?
Yes. So 2022 through 2023, are those year-to-date or are they months in comparison?
These are all year-to-date numbers.
Okay. When I'm looking at year-to-dates, and can we go to Area 6 is a great comparison. I'm looking at different areas, and if we're looking at Area 6, for example, and all other city locations, it may not be the best, but when I was looking at comparisons, something's going on, and I know that we had a sales tax increase, and maybe we're collecting that, bag fee where this stores keep 5 cents, we get 5 cents, something like that, but something's going on. All of a sudden, there's this big spike where if it's 2024 and this is just January and February, correct? It doesn't include March. I'm thinking, what is going on? And if we go back to Area 4, please, or 5, I apologize. We've talked about Area 5, like what is going on? And this is an area that I know well, where they were struggling in 2023. They were kind of going down in 2022, recovering from COVID. And now all of a sudden, they've collected in 2 months as much as they did in all the years previous. And I look at all the other areas and something's going on. Any idea? I know you had a big audit, but did it impact all the areas?
No, it did not. And I would have to research Area 5 to see why this.
Okay, and it's just not Area 5. It's a lot of the areas. If you go to Area 3, same thing. Area 1, everybody is at or above their total sales tax for the year already compared to what they've done in years previous. They're going to exceed. And it just makes me go, fantastic. People are shopping and buying in Englewood, but then it makes me go, what's going on here that we're already exceeding what we have done the previous 4 years. And that kind of brings pause to me. So I just don't know. The other question I had is when we were looking at the tax tables, and I'm sorry, Director Engels, but what is, there's a big collection, healthcare service. What is taxable for healthcare service?
And that one is related to the audit that I mentioned earlier. It's the things that the hospitals sell that are taxable, and also some of the vendors that sell to the hospital that also, and that's what one of the audits was a vendor that supplies them with items that they were not remitting the tax on.
Okay, because we're raking it in on that, so it's okay. Okay, that's, I don't know, I have pause because I scratch my head at that because we're collecting, and if this continues, those graphs are going to be huge.
So remember, right, just a
compared to
point of
everything, so thank
clarification,
you.
these are year-to-date numbers, so they're just a comparison up to February for each year. So.
Well, I thought he just said it was the total years for the others.
I'm sorry, total year to date. So all of the columns there are through February of each year.
Okay, I misunderstood then because I thought you
I
said it was
apologize.
total year for them. Okay, well, still compared, something's going on. Okay, thank you. Well, that makes it clear too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Member Wright. And just when we did these, when the sales tax increase passed in November 22, did it take effect on January 1st?
It did.
It did,
yes.
so then everything's even then. Okay.
And that definitely would cause that. So I misunderstood
It
him.
would have, but
So-
if they all started on January 1st.
Yeah, and it
it
would
wouldn't be the main
impact it, like
driver.
I said,
Yeah.
yes. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Member Wright. Member Ward.
With regard to Member Wright's question about Area 5 in particular, I'll draw your attention to the council request that I put in previously regarding Area 5, CRT 0572, dated April 25th, 2023. It talks about some of the factors involved in Area 5, in particular, one taxpayer who can't be divulged because we don't divulge information on individual taxpayer accounts, but that is a factor in the fluctuations in Area 5, is the sector that particular taxpayer is in.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Wright, do you have anything else? Your light's still on, so. All right. Any other questions regarding the February financial report? Director Engels, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item, we have Director of Utilities in South Platte, Pieter Van Rij, and Deputy Director of Business Services, Sarah Stone. Lead Service Line Contractor Hazen Sawyer, here to present and discuss the Lead Service Line Municipal Code amendments. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us tonight. I want to thank Director Engels for an additional 5 minutes to my no, I'm kidding. We'll try and get through this fairly efficiently tonight. So we are here tonight to talk about the next step in our lead reduction program, and that's some code amendments that we have to make in order to be able to move forward with a program to replace lead service lines in our community. And so we've been working through this. If you recall, in the fall, we brought an initial set of code amendments that at least got us to the point where we were able to work through the characterization and the potholing. And now these are the code amendments that would that we need to put in place in order to ensure that we can actually do the full replacement of those lines. So we'll run through those. So what we're essentially doing is, and the image you see here is the typical approach to how we would replace a lead service line. So essentially what happens is there's a lead service line from the water main in the street to just inside the home. And the intent of the program is they typically will cut like a 4 foot by 4 foot square in the street above the water line, and then they'll tunnel to the house itself and then go through the foundation or into the crawl space. Inside would be a spool of copper that they'll pull back through. That would be the new service line. They'll disconnect the old lead service line, may or may not pull it out depending on how easy it is to get it out, and then reconnect a new copper service line and essentially make that a new copper service. So what we need through these code amendments are, one, to establish the program, also establish the financial conditions that that outline our replacement efforts and how we're going to do that and how we're going to use SRF and grant money to do that, as well as requirements for metered water service, which actually is a separate item that we'll be talking about tonight, and Sarah will be presenting that. And then ensuring that we're being clear in terms of who's responsible versus whether it's customer versus city. So it's essentially what these code changes do. One of the most significant aspects of this is how we communicate with our customers that we determine have a lead service line. And what we have worked through as a process is a step-by-step approach with multiple points of contact with a homeowner to try to work with them to replace the line. We anticipate that the vast majority of people that we talk to that have a lead service line will say, yes, please come in and replace my lead service line, and we'll do it. This, in the instances where we potentially don't have that happen, where a customer for one reason or another may not want us to enter their property or whatever, this helps us define that approach. What you can see is the form that we would initially provide to a customer to work with them to start to schedule this process. Essentially the program itself is intending to replace the whole line with the funding that we anticipate receiving through the SRF, which is the state revolving fund, the loan that we'll be talking about a little bit at the end of this, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law funding that actually is principal forgiveness money in the total of $10 million, which is essentially $10 million from the feds to help us do this that we don't have to pay back. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. Essentially, if we have someone who decides that they don't want us to do that, what we would do is we would put them on a list and we would replace the city portion of the line. So from the water main to the curb stop or the meter pit, whatever's in there in place, and then the remaining piece would be the customer's responsibility. The SRF language actually doesn't allow us to, if a customer refuses to allow us to replace their side of the line, we can't actually use SRF money to replace the city side of the line. So that'll come out of rates, which is, again, we don't anticipate this being a lot of people, but there is a consequence if people refuse to allow us to do it. So we are going to try to encourage them to let us take care of this for them. When we had originally brought this up, there was the concern around around balancing the health and safety aspect of a lead service line versus property rights. And we took that feedback back. We actually went back and turns out we weren't the only ones dealing with this. Apparently, this is something that's been happening in lead programs across the U.S., which the EPA is accounting for in their new regulation, which is actually out for public comment right now. It is not the final lead regulation. However, we anticipate it going into effect probably in October of this year. It's in the public comment period right now. But essentially what it identifies is that if an entity like the City of Englewood Utilities Department makes 4 attempts to replace that line with the customer and the customer just refuses or doesn't respond, then we can move on, replace our side of the line, and then that residual piece becomes a piece that carries with the property. What we would then do is we would do much like we do with the meter program right now, which is have a title change trigger. So if someone today doesn't want us to replace their side of the line, then the title change would trigger that change to occur, because the new person buying that house probably doesn't even know that there was a history of not replacing that line, but they should replace that line. The challenge is that becomes their responsibility at that point in time. So that's why we want to help our customers see that this is a tremendous value to them. And then, so what you can see through the actual code changes, property rights we talked about, 4 outreach attempts we talked about, how the not replacement occurs, and then how new property owners will be. So basically, this is just a summary of all those things. I probably could have advanced the slide and gone through all these, but here's a summary of what I just said. The last piece being that if the customer does not allow us to replace the utility side of it, then we can ultimately use the approach of suspension of service, because that's something that is actually the city's responsibility at that point. So if you look at our timeline, we anticipate the SRF loan coming through in early 2024. LCRR is called, so what we're under right now is called the lead and copper rule. There's lead and copper rule revisions, which is another version of lead and copper rule that's in place but doesn't apply to us right now. What we're going to fall under is the lead and copper rule improvements, which is LCRI. That's what I talked about in October. And then there's a compliance deadline within the LCRI of October 2027. And you can see what has to be done by that point in time. And then ultimately, the new LCRI expects utilities across the U.S. to have all of their lines removed by 2037. So we are on the front end of that. One of the values of being on the front end of that is we have access to federal money that is grant money, essentially grant money to help do this. And 2, right now we are in a position, we're in this uniquely good position in that we went through a round of lead testing. We had to do 2 rounds of 6-month testing. As long as those results came back that the 90th percentile of those results were less than 5 micrograms per liter of lead, then we actually are deemed optimal from our corrosion control effort, which you recall was an effort that was triggered when we went above 50,000 people served. And so our numbers are about 4.4, between 4.4 and 4.6. So it's not that we don't have any lead, it's that our lead levels are really, really low, and low enough that we can actually determine our own path right now. If we at any point in time trigger above that 5 micrograms per liter, then we become under the direction of the state of Colorado, which with a much more prescriptive approach to how we do this. So we're kind of in this sweet spot that we have the ability to, we have the funding, we have the funding coming in through the SRF and the infrastructure law, and but we also have flexibility in that we're not completely directed step by step from the state. So it's good news. That's why we want to do this ahead of time before we get later in the schedule, which would be in the late 20s, 2020 through 2037. because we anticipate that there will probably be even less funding. And by then we quite possibly could trigger because we're getting close to that 5 micrograms per liter. A little bit more extensive background into how we're making these decisions to address this issue. You can see the things that are complete and where we anticipate moving forward. So the corrosion control study that I just talked about, that's the that gives us that ability to, that third bullet, retain the control of the program. And what we put in the language with the state is that we would replace those lead service lines within the next 5 years. Because we have 3 years as an ideal goal, because that's some of the timing that you have to spend that federal money. But ultimately, 5 years is probably a more realistic goal in terms of how we spend that money. So it'll be somewhere between 3 and 5 years. And by the end of that time period, the city of Englewood should be rid of this lead service line problem, with the exception of maybe a couple people who refuse to allow us to do that, which is a really, really good thing for our utility. The steps would be an individual would sign and submit the enclosed consent form within 7 days. Then we do an on-site visit. The on-site visit would be a representative from the contractor and a representative from utilities for all of these, so that there is a utilities staff person there. And then if we need to do the replacement, we will do the replacement. You can see it takes about 6 to 8 hours. So that house will be without water for the 6 to 8 hours that it takes to replace the line. They actually do these fairly quickly. And then the homeowners will receive a 1-year warranty on that line, which is actually a warranty for the city through the city's contractor. And then we'll do an internal plumbing flush. And then we'll also offer the option to utilize a filter pitcher, which is proven to remove lead, as an extra precautionary approach with any lead lines that are removed. And that's something the state has encouraged us to ensure that we keep as an option for customers, to help truly ensure that they feel like they have protection. You can see the outreach schedule. So we'll start with water bills. We have a number of community events, 4 anticipated. We have some in-person community meetings that will be occurring through the late summer and fall. And then we'll also be doing in-person consultations, door hanger notifications, things like that. Our approach is to do this by zones in the city. You don't want to, if you do a street, you want to do the whole street. Contractor just knocks them out until they get through the street, and then they move on to the next street. It's the most efficient way to do this, most cost-effective way to do this. And so there'll be multiple points throughout between May and the fall for customers to interact with us. So ultimately, you can see what the program's trying to do, trying to get the most significant lead exposure that we have in our system out, and then do that while maximizing funding and respecting property rights. So the last piece of this, from maximizing available funding, is the and City Attorney Niles and I were talking about this before the meeting, which is I think you're all aware that we were approved for $40 million of state revolving fund money, which was that was on March 8th. So that was a really huge win for us as a utility. The credit goes to Deputy Director Sarah Stone, because she's the one who has spent the last year working through this process and working with the state revolving fund to get not just the revolving fund money, but the bipartisan infrastructure law money as well. So the way that money works, we have to do an ordinance in order to accept all that. The way the SRF secures their funding is they package a number of community projects and they go out to the bond market. They have a AAA plus rating, so they get really, really good rates and terms on their bond. But so they'll package a significant part of our money that's not part of the bipartisan infrastructure law money with Greeley has money, that they're seeking. Town of Lockbuoy, South Adams County Water and Sand District, and Town of Boone was the other one. So so what they do is they package those 5 sets of projects, and then they go out to the bond market as one entity to issue those bonds. So there's a schedule that they're trying to meet on that, and we're trying to balance our process through going through ordinance and readings in 30 days with the timing of what they need in order to do all that. And so Sarah has the dates on those. So if you want to just run through the dates that we've talked through with the SRF, that'd be great.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So I will start with our proposed schedule. So we plan to bring this forward to the Water and Sewer Board on April 9th, and then we would bring it to council for first reading on the 15th. And then I'll go into SRF's schedule because the second reading is what we need to discuss tonight. So SRF would like to have confirmation that we have approved resolutions or ordinances approving the loan the week of April 24th through 26th so that they can post the preliminary official statement to potential bond investors on April 30th. Then the Colorado Water Power Authority would then place those bonds for sale on May 8th with the intention of closing the bonds and loans on May 23rd. So that the date of the second reading is, I guess, what's in question as to whether or not that needs to be an emergency or special meeting, emergency adoption of an ordinance or special meeting.
Yeah, so you can see we're trying to fit with their schedule to go out to the bond market. And it requires some adjustment to our approach. So it could either be emergency ordinance on the first reading on the 15th, or we do a first reading on the 15th with an emergency on the 23rd, and then waive the 30-day, and then they can issue their advertisement for the bond. That at least gets 2 readings on the ordinance. But we're trying not to hold up their process as they're securing all this money for us.
Can I just add, I'll just add, so that total that they're trying to put out on the market is 129 million. And so we are 40 million of that, and actually even less that's going out to the bond market.
So just another thing that we'd like to get a sense from council in terms of an approach. And like I said, City Attorney Niles and I talked about this at 5:30 today, and we're open to suggestions.
Thank you so much, Director Van Rye. Just a clarification. So the first reading we would still do on the 15th, and then we would have to have a special meeting on the 22nd.
22nd or 23rd, whichever works for council. Okay. Yeah, so the 15th, the reason for the 15th is because that allows us to go to Water and Sewer Board on the 9th.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much for the presentation, Director Van Rye. You joked, but you actually did use up the 5 minutes that you received. So.
Yeah, City Manager Lewis just let me know that. So I'll go back and thank Director Engels.
Mayor Pro Tem, if you want to ask the first question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Director Van Rye. Is a emergency ordinance required if we do it a week later, I guess, or is that we can do that just with a special meeting?
An emergency ordinance still requires 2 readings. However, they can be on consecutive days, and it goes into effect immediately. It also requires a unanimous vote. So I wasn't sure how fast we could get this to council when we discussed at 5:30, because it generally goes to Water Sewer Board first and then comes to council, and then still meet the deadline to go out to the bond market. Alternatively, if we do a regular ordinance, at least 7 days must elapse from first reading to second reading, and then it doesn't go into effect until 30 days after the second reading. Well, 30 days after second publication, but our clerks are on top of it. It happens very quickly after second reading.
And so this would need to be an emergency ordinance because they want it to go into effect before they go out to market with it. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that it would be best for us to be able to have clarity in the ordinance by the 23rd or 24th, because that's when the SRF is trying to advertise to the bond market. correct?
Yeah, they advertise on the 30th, so they would want confirmation from us that week of the 23rd. So that's a Tuesday. So sometime that week, they would want confirmation that we have approved.
Okay.
So the
some-
30-day piece of this is
That's
really is a problem in the calendar.
right. So it sounds like if we want to do, if we want to meet their deadline, we need to do an emergency ordinance. Okay. Supportive of that.
Deputy Director or Director Van Ryn, what is the potential impact in terms of the interest rate if we didn't follow this emergency? What's the delta in the two?
It's not the interest rate that's a question. I think it's when they would try to get those bonds out it's timing of when they'd get them out to the market. So it's affecting the projects for these other towns and cities as well, because they want to package it all as one. They wouldn't necessarily take a $40 million bond and try and sell that in the same way they would for 129.
Okay. Thank you. Member Russell?
Thank you. Is it possible to have an emergency meeting of the Water and Sewer Board and then it could come to council earlier?
Great question.
If I understand your timing, you're talking about April 23rd, right? Is when
Yes.
so that's the problem because our ordinances don't go into effect until 30 days after second reading. So we were acting under the assumption that it was sometime in May earlier today so that we had some options. But if they need to know by the end of April, if we are going to participate, then it would have to be by emergency ordinance because it goes into effect immediately after second reading.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking, have we waited too long or something like that? But in reality, again, we got the board approved it on March 8th, so that was 2 weeks ago, essentially, last Friday, and really lining up water sewer board, council, they just have a faster time frame than our ordinance process has, and so we're trying to not, like Sarah said, impact those other communities, and also work with them on their schedule that they're trying to issue these bonds.
So we would still have, so this is just delaying the process if we weren't to follow, if we were to keep our standard process and wait 30 days for the ordinance, we're just delaying the other small cities. We still have access to the $40 million revolving fund, correct? If we delayed it or no? We lose out on the $40 million revolving fund if we don't do.
I don't know that it's that simple, but I don't know that it's also.
So it's
we're
somewhere
trying
in
to make
between.
it easy
Yeah,
for them
okay.
because they're trying to get us $40 million. I guess is the simplistic way to say that.
It's a good way to put it.
And 10 million of that is principal forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will just offer, Steve Price with Hazen is in the audience. He just texted me that so the Water and Power Authority Board only typically likes to sell bonds every 6 months. So that's the delay that we're talking about is, it'd be another 6 months.
Okay. Thank you so much. Member Wright.
So council meets on the 15th. Could we vote and then meet on a special meeting on the 16th and have that second vote, and that would speed it up by a week?
We would recommend, because they have to have it by April 23rd, we're already meeting for a scheduled study session April 22nd. So rather than have council come to another meeting, we would suggest first reading April 15th, second reading April 22nd, and designate it as a special meeting for that purpose, even though it's a study session as well. And then it would be effect April 22nd, and we would meet the April 23rd deadline.
But then the April.
Siri calendar on Apple Watch only goes out 7 days.
I have that same problem.
And that's why I don't have one. But so then what is the deadline for the 30 days that they are wanting is what I guess the question is.
So they're not looking, so we have the 30-day requirement on ordinances. Their deadline is April 30th to noticed the bond market that they're about to issue $120 million worth of bonds, of which we are a significant portion of that.
So I guess my question is, if they have the yes, the ordinance doesn't take effect for 30 days.
You got that one? Okay.
Yes, so the 30 days doesn't apply to the emergency ordinance. So if we did the 15 and the second reading on the 22nd, and we designate it as an emergency ordinance, which we can under charter, there's no 30-day time frame. It would be effective April 22nd. If, however, we follow the regular ordinance process, technically it doesn't go into effect. Well, not technically. It's not effective until 30 days after
in May.
second reading, because then it's subject to challenge,
So
citizen
we, so
referendum.
we would be meeting the deadlines that need to, by following this process that you're proposing then.
Through the emergency process,
Okay,
right?
okay, so then we would be good to go then. So, okay, great.
Any further questions for members of council?
Can I ask a question that doesn't pertain to all this? So that's just.
Well, only if it's kind of within the realm of this. We can't really speak. Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Right. Thank you for the presentation. We keep hearing about residents and replacing lead lines. Will we be replacing commercial lead lines also?
Yes. However, there are very few of those because typically a commercial line is bigger and commercial lines are not historically made of lead. So I think we have one that we've identified that's a commercial property that has a lead. I believe I heard that. So it's a really, really low amount. Any property that's either residential or commercial will get their lead line removed.
Fantastic. And then one of the things that, I don't know, bugs me a little bit, that if someone goes to buy a home and it's a lead line, it becomes that new homeowner's problem. Is there a way to put, they have to do a title search, and if there's a lien or something, that old owner has to fix it. Can we put a flag that, oh, you have a lead line, that has to be corrected before that new, like a lead lien or something on that title? Is that something we could look at doing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so we, in our office, we process those title requests, and we would add in the note for that title status that there was a lead line on that property.
And it must be replaced before, I think it should be on the owner that is selling that to replace that, and they refused. So it's just something that,
Yeah, I think what you're asking is that we proactively assign it to the seller so it doesn't become the buyer's problem.
yes,
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
And I think we can do that,
Yeah,
right?
so we would communicate that it was a part of that property, and then I think it would be up to the negotiation between the buyer and seller and how they're going to deal with
Right,
that. Yeah.
give them money off so they replace it or whatever, but before it passes final inspection or whatever, it has to be done. So, okay, thank you.
So I just want to clarify that, because it's not, it doesn't have to be replaced before final inspection. With the code changes that we're proposing, it has to be replaced within 90 days of transfer of ownership.
So, okay, so if it, before it is transferred or after transfer?
After transfer.
Okay, so the lead line police are going to knock on the door and say, we need to, see your certificate that it's been changed, or how's that process going to work?
So we will have to have a tracking process for that.
Okay. Okay.
We're hopeful that this is a very, very small number of
Yeah,
properties in our
the names
community.
are ringing in my head, so I just,
Yeah.
and those
So-
that may have been fixed, may have been that are lead that we don't know lead that we thought. I could see very few springing up, so,
Yeah, so it would be something that we'd have to track long-term, which is, part of why we want to encourage everybody to do it. But we recognize that this is something that we'll have to potentially deal with.
right.
Yep.
So, and good. You just checked all the boxes. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem and then Member Prang.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple of questions. The first thing was on the testing for that under that 5 micrograms per liter. Is that tested the same way other tests are done throughout the system-wide, or is that, since the lead would theoretically be coming from lead service lines, are those tested inside of homes?
So it's actually at the point where we take the samples now, which are sample stations and meter pits, and those meter pits sometimes are on that short lead piece. So there is a possibility that there could be a hit from one of those if a meter pit is on a lead line. Is that correct?
Not quite.
No.
So,
I'm going to defer to Deputy Director Stone to answer this correctly.
so as a
She's
part
getting
of,
tips from the audience. So.
I can cheat back here. So we have, I believe 60, 60 residents that are part of our lead and copper testing pool. So they get, like basically liter bottles dropped off at their door. They have a testing procedure that they have to follow. They fill up their liter bottle, they leave it on the door. Utility staff comes and picks it up, and then we test it.
Got it. Okay.
My apologies. I got that one just wrong. So I apologize.
Well, that clarify, it makes more sense that they would be testing those from within homes if they're coming from the service lines. The other question is, in your diagram, it showed the copper on a spool. Is that like flexible copper?
It is.
So
It's
is it thinner walled than what would normally go, like if you were going to redo the copper pipes in your house? It's usually not flexible.
yeah. So copper piping in your house is rigid copper. Service line copper is actually flexible. So, and that's just the way it.
Is it less robust because it's flexible, or is it just a different
It's
composite of materials or something?
I wouldn't say that it's not less robust. It has the same level of pressure capability as a non-flexible, but they use flexible because it's got to go through the ground and it has to and ground the ground settles, and so it's just the technology for copper pipe. So it's just a more malleable copper.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Member Prang.
Thank you. So I'm making an assumption that we have met the mark as far as the October 16th goal for doing inventory, given the fact that you've already identified 3,000 pipes that need to be replaced throughout the city, or are we still working on the inventory aspect?
No, we completed that by December 31st of last year, so we were ahead of schedule on that. So that was that. We tested 370 locations, properties, and that met our identification phase.
Okay. And so has there been any notification given to residents to date, or we have to wait until we become part of the bond package through after the hopefully emergency ordinance passes to participate, and then immediately we hit the ground running with notification in May?
So there has been some notification. I will turn it over to Sarah. She can talk a bit about what we've done thus far.
Yeah, so we've a couple things. So for the property owners that were potholed last fall, if it resulted in a lead line, we let them know. We gave them a letter. We gave them a picture if they wanted one that's certified to remove lead. So that was a part of that program. In addition to that, we have sent a service area-wide notification where we invited all customers to a public meeting. So we had to hold a public meeting, I think it was in the fall of last year, as a part of this SRF process to inform residents and customers of the program, why we are asking for the funding, and then we provided a lot of information about lead lines and where those might be found within the city service area. Additionally, we have several resources on the city's website, and even a inventory map where a customer can go in and see if their line is designated as lead, assumed lead, non-lead, or assumed non-lead. So those resources have been made available, and we've sent out communication to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. I think it's an aggressive timeline, and I like that it's aggressive. But I also like the fact that there's been some preliminary conversation with the community. So it's not like we're hitting May and suddenly we have to get this done in the next 3 months. Thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you. And I thank you for the report. So I have a question, and I may have asked this before. On page 9 at the top of the page, the ordinance is 12-1A-11, inspection and access to property. And that's on the bottom of page 8. But then on the top of page 9, it talks about, this is the second sentence ends, areas of the property deemed reasonably necessary by the city to conduct such inspection, including the customer side service line, shall be open for inspection at all reasonable times to authorize representatives of the city to inspect for safety hazards, customer side service line materials and specifications, and violation of, and go ahead, municipal code. Then you go down to the last sentence. The city shall not be liable for any damages resulting from inspection or disconnection of service under this chapter. Was that in there before? Is that something that we didn't address, or is that what we addressed prior to the inspection last year?
So I'm going to say it's probably a combination of both. And I'm going to turn to Sarah because I think she knows the specific of that language.
I would say it's a combination of both. I don't have what that language looked like, before we made those changes, but I can certainly find that. But yes, I would agree that it's a combination of both.
So what we did is, and if you recall this in the fall, is we added that ability to inspect to what's our typical ability that has been in code for decades relative to being able to access the home for meters and ERTs and things like that. And so I think you did bring this up at Water and Sewer Board, that what we'd like to do is we'd like to make sure that we don't necessarily see, especially with the way that the EPA has moved forward with their lead program, we think we can tighten this language back up to be more geared towards our access for meters and ERTs, which I think can help address some of the concerns that you had raised. We just weren't ready to do that yet.
Right, and that's fine, but I do want to make sure, because it talks about shutting off their service lines and things, and I just want to make sure we have make sure that the customer has due process rights. But if this is something we just changed, I'm okay to wait to tighten that up a little down the road.
Yeah,
if
and
we
I think
can do that.
in Sarah's next presentation, she'll talk about more of the due process associated with, again, meters and ERTs and meter service, which is really where we need that ability to access, because those meters will die, those senders will die, and that's the way the utility is operated for, as long as we've had meters for 40 years. So but the inspect piece was the part we added last fall, so we can go back and look at that.
Okay, thank you. And then this is just a typographical error, and it's on that same page on page 9, 12-1B-4, and it's under B where it talks about the distance, 5-foot minimal horizontal distance, and then 18 inches minimum vertical district. So basically the 18 inches, it has the foot marking. It's got a single quotation mark instead of a double.
That's a great catch.
Well, it was annoying me because I thought, what is that? And then when I read the words, I figured it out.
18 feet's a big
Right.
vertical
All
separation.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of council? Member Noonekamp.
I have a question. I'm sorry if I'm missing it. I'm looking in the ordinance draft itself. But if the homeowner decides on the customer side replacement that they want to do it themselves, it says that they can do it at a separate time from when the utility side is replaced. Is there a time limit about how long they can take to replace it if they want to do it themselves? Or are we waiting for the title to change, or is there a cutoff?
You mean if they wanted to do it ahead of this program? Or
Separate from the utility side replacement?
So if a homeowner, so I think there's a few different scenarios that it could occur here. One, if a homeowner wants to do it in advance of the program itself, we haven't contemplated, any kind of a funding of that. So if someone just wanted to do it, next 6 months and we don't anticipate getting to their area for a year and a half, I think that would, right now we would operate as if that's just incumbent upon the homeowner at that point in time. It actually gives them an incentive to wait for us. If it's someone who chooses to not replace the line, we come through, we replace all the lines, but they still own the house, and later on they decide. At that point in time, they can do it at any time that they want. And then they would just provide us notice that it was replaced. And then the last deadline would be if it transfers ownership, they have 90 days to do it.
So what if they decide not to replace the line and there's many years that go by before it transfers ownership? What level of risk does that open the system up to?
So what the EPA is included in, and this is where we became comfortable with as well, and I think the EPA became comfortable with this, is there is a, and I'm going to turn to Steve because he knows the technical term for this device that goes on the lead line between where it's been replaced to new copper and it's an old line. And what's it called, Steve? A dielectric coupling that gets mounted on the line, and that protects the city side of the service from that residual lead line that stays in place. And that's what creates that barrier that wasn't there before, so that it doesn't create a vulnerability for the system.
Even if it's for years, potentially, until the house would change title.
I believe, what's the lifespan of a dielectric coupling? We would anticipate that EPA wouldn't approve it as an approach unless it was contemplating that. So I would imagine that that's a long-term protection at that point.
It's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions from council? I'm chewing on ice at the wrong time, so. Member Ward, go ahead.
I just have a comment, if I may, Mayor. I just want to thank you and your team for making some adjustments to the plan here based upon some concerns I had, the member Russell had, regarding property owners' rights to determine who does and doesn't enter their property and when, and the consent of the owners. I think this package is far better than what was originally presented to us, so I appreciate your work in that area.
Thank you, and thank you for the feedback.
All right. And with that, thank you very much for your time, Director Van Ryan, though you're not going very far, so I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item, which, let me get to the slide here.
We are ahead of schedule now, but I don't want that to influence how you talk about this next item.
Well, fortunately, I'm going to turn this one over to Deputy Director Stone, so we might get even farther ahead of schedule.
There we go.
So I am actually going to turn this over to Deputy Director Stone, and she's going to present the next item.
Okay. So this next item, so speaking of the feedback that Councilmember Ward spoke of during the Water Sewer Board meeting in February, we had brought these meter code amendments along with the lead service line code amendments, and we were requested to pull that out. So that's why we've pulled it out, and it's coming about the same time. But one of the things that is important to note that the flat rate meters, those services, a lot of those are on lead service lines. So we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to compel people in some form with the lead program to transition from flat rate to metered services. So that's why this is coming around the same time. So a little background, there are still 1,183 flat rate customers remaining in the system. That's about 10% of the metered, or of the number of customers. Metered service was required by state law since April 1990. So Deputy City Attorney McDermott found legislation that the state of Colorado passed in April 1990 that all water providers had to have all customers on metered service. There was a timeline provided in that legislation where 50% of unmetered customers had to be metered by January 2005 and the remainder by January 2009. So we have, the city of Inglewood has essentially been out of compliance with that law since 2009. There were not penalties associated with that legislation, but that's just more for council's awareness. So this transition from flat rate to metered service was included in the 2020 master plan recommendations. There is provisions for this in the current city code. We do require within 90 days after the sale or transfer of a property that a meter is installed. Because of Many of those are on lead service lines. There are a number of them that have been put on a list. They've transferred in the last several years, and they are on this list of, until we had a program in place or an understanding of what lead lines did to, or needed to be replaced, we did not install those meters. So those would be first on our list to install meters when they get their lead service line replaced. So if there's a change of property from residential to commercial or industrial, that is also a time at which the service needs to be converted to meter. And then the language in the code currently, it was when deemed to be in the best interest of the city. So we have brought these code changes forward to really refine those requirements. So in our proposed code amendments, we're establishing the requirement for metered service, again, to comply with the state law that's been in effect since April 1990. We define the city and customer responsibilities regarding that conversion from a flat rate to metered service. And we're establishing customer outreach requirements and then establishing penalties for noncompliance. One of the things that we wanted to balance in the code changes and then on our normal business practices are the outreach attempts to convert from flat rate to metered services. So for new property owners, that title change triggers that notification to convert from a flat rate, and they must convert within 90 days of that property sale. For existing flat rate customers, we would post this on our website and issue it as, a business practice, is to send a notification letter via U.S. mail with at least 30 days advance notice to schedule that conversion. So that piece is in code, but we wanted to also dig in a little deeper about what if we don't get response. So what do we do if we don't get response and we have deemed that this customer needs to convert from a flat rate? So if there is no response, we'd send a second letter requiring response within 14 days. If there's, again, no response, we would place a blue tag on the property to have that property owner contact utilities immediately. And then if there's continued no response, then they would be subject to the penalty provisions that are in the suggested language. Meter pit installation is scheduled with the customer once payment for the meter equipment is received. So part of our current practice is meter exchanges. So that's a meter or equipment that needs to be replaced. When there are outside set meters, so meters that are in a pit, there does not need to be any customer interaction to exchange that meter or the electronics, so the ERTs. However, field crews, as a current practice, always knock on the door of the customer prior to beginning work, just to let them know that they're there and what they're doing. For inside set meters, this is current practice as well, is we send a notification letter via mail that the meter or the ERT needs to be replaced and require them to contact utilities within 30 days. If no response, we would then send a second letter requiring response in 14 days. Again, no response, a blue tag would be placed on that property to contact utilities. And then if there's still continued no response, and we have had this happen, and there's just a handful of times since I've been here in the last 3 years, we would double the water bill each month. So we would take an estimate of what their water bill would be, and then we would double that until that amount elicited some type of response from the customer. And then once that meter exchange is complete, the credit is issued to the customer. So I will open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director. Member Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. So what about, I don't know if you would necessarily call them abandoned properties, but I mean, I know there have been some, not necessarily that you were dealing with, but, maybe people had broken into the house and were living in the house, but water may not even be turned on. So what if it's an owner that lives out of state or rental properties? I mean, when I had a rental property, if I had things like public service or whatever, I always made sure that, like, the water department would have my contact information. But I'm probably sure there are rental owners that don't do that.
There are. So that is one of the challenges that we have, and it'll actually be a challenge as we begin the lead service line program is we need that property owner's information. And so we do have some accounts where we have that information and the property owner even receives the bill, but there are times when they don't. So if it is a rental property and they are responsible for the bill, they would get the notification, and then we can include in that language to give it to the property owner that it is the property owner's responsibility to replace that meter.
Okay. And did Englewood have legislation before, because this goes back to 1990, that it was like with the title of the property also, that the meters had to be put in? Was that information?
Yeah, so I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the code accounted for that on transfer of the property. And so that was the trigger that all right, this is going way back, so I'm just interpreting what probably was the thought process, was that if they do it as properties transfer, then over time, the city will be able to come in compliance with the law, and by 2009, we'd be in compliance with the law. Probably worked for a substantial number of properties. However, we still have 10% that have been hanging out there for 15 years that require a different approach than what we've done in the past, which is why we're bringing these.
Or we may have missed it, and there were transfers. That's a possibility too.
Possible. We probably did miss some. I wouldn't necessarily say that our systems have always been the most comprehensive, but I don't think we would have missed 1,200. So I would say the majority of these are probably ones that are just legacy properties that haven't changed hands.
Okay.
And are still on a flat.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Member Wright?
Thank you. And this question's more for the City Attorney Niles. Because we are home rule, would we necessarily back then have to follow the state law? And maybe that's why there wasn't a rush on this?
Well, I can't speak to what the analysis was back then, or if it was even considered. I don't have anything in my file that even suggests the city attorney's office analyzed it. That doesn't mean they don't. Our records are a bit in disarray at times. But generally, if it's uniformly applicable to the entire state, then yes, it would apply to us as well. Generally, we can make some revisions, such as we could make it more stringent or something like that. But generally, whether we're home rule or not, if there is a state law that says everyone has to do this, generally it would apply to us as well. And it was our conclusion that this law does in fact apply to us and we can't change it.
Okay. And I think, I've talked to people on flat rate, generally ends up being cheaper for people that are metered. I guess it would depend on how long they've been metered.
So here's an anecdotal experience that I just had a couple weeks ago. There's a house on my block that got flipped, and it was an open house, and I went and saw it, and I was talking to the guy who flipped it, and he said, "Oh yeah, I don't have a meter, and so I'm on some list," and he said, "But I'm on a flat rate and I pay $135 a month." And he said, "I'm just going to leave it on my flat rate because over in Lakewood I pay $150 a month and it's a good deal." And so I didn't have a chance to tell him, well, if you go meter, you're probably going to be closer to $85 a month because someone came in and it was more important for him to sell the house. But his perception was in that moment that $135 was a good deal. And it's not when you look at it compared to what a metered rate is in the city of Englewood. Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things you can do with a flat rate, but there's only so much lawn you can water on the lots that we have in Englewood.
Member Russell?
Thank you. So I do have a question. If some of those 1,183 people are on fixed income and it'll be pretty tough for them to come up with that, could they make payment arrangements for the meter?
Yeah, so I think we talked, and this is a good point, we talked about this at the Water and Sewer Board, was the cost of the meter is $321, and so that is the responsibility of the homeowner. And then what the city does is we provide the necessary labor to put it in. And what we talked about in the Water and Sewer Board was, instead of giving a homeowner, potentially, especially if they're on a fixed income, a $321 bill 1 month, is to keep them on their flat rate until that pays off that amount. And then as soon as that meter cost is paid off over the course of 4 or 5 months, then they would convert to their metered rate. So they wouldn't see a bump at all. It would just be a matter of us tracking essentially the cost through the credit of the flat rate until they can convert to a flat rate. And we think that that's actually a great approach.
But they would have to let you know if you want payment before you're going to put the meter in. You wouldn't know that you could do that unless they told you, we can't necessarily afford that.
Yeah, and I think that would just occur as we're working with the customer installing the meters through this whole process. So we're going to be talking to the customer, so we can afford them the ability to do it that way. They can pay it all off at once if they don't want the 320 hanging over them. We think there's an easy way to work with people that it doesn't create any kind of an unwanted addition on their flat rate, and ultimately gets them to a point where their amount should go down.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Member Pring?
Thank you. So I saw referenced in the presentation both the potential to incentivize people through doubling a water bill or through disruption of service. So which one is it? Is it both? And where is that referenced in the code updates?
I will have to. So the doubling of the bill is not referenced in the code updates. That is a business practice that we have in place to elicit that response from that customer, because we had one, I want to say it was last year, where we were doubling their bill for a period of 6 months before that finally triggered them to call us and say, what's going on? Why is my bill continuing to go up? So we do get that, where it's just an extended period of time where we sent several letters and did not get a response. And so that's one of our practices that we do within utilities to get that response. So the shut off then for that particular situation would come if they did not pay their bill. So if they went through that 45-day process where they were then overdue, and then they were issued a red tag, and then they still didn't pay a portion or at least give us a call, then we would shut off their water service.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that-
So they're
okay.
getting notification all along the way.
Correct.
And
Yeah, so that notification, bill's the first thing. They
Right.
then get an overdue notice. They then get a red tag,
okay.
and that's 5 days before shut off, and then that's that final.
Is there a certain portion of that bill that's been doubled along the way that they have to pay before disruption of service?
It's if they don't pay anything,
Okay.
then there's a
So
disruption
the
to
city will
service.
continue to work with residents who are making an attempt to pay down that bill?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and in reality, it could go on indefinitely. It's just a matter of, and once, so this has happened only a couple times in the last few years. It doesn't happen often. And the whole point is to get their attention. And once it gets their attention, then we go back, we change out whatever the ERT, and then we get the reading, and basically what they end up with is a massive credit on their bill, because we've been estimating and then doubling that estimate to try and get them to respond to us. And so they're not out anything other than they've been paying us more money in advance that they ultimately get credited back through their water usage numbers.
I know I would notice if my bill was doubled, but I'm wondering, are those situations largely related to rental properties where maybe the renter is not communicating with their landlord and the landlord is not aware that this is going on?
That's very possible, because it depends on the owner's preference as to whether they receive the water bills or they make that the responsibility of the renter. So it's hard to say. We don't have a good data on that.
And this is infrequent that we use it. How many times do you think?
I think in the 3 years I've been here, I've seen it used like 3 times.
Yeah, so it's very rarely used. And when we do use it, it works because then they call us. And that one gentleman called us after 6 months.
All right. Any further questions for members of council? Deputy Director, you kept us within within the time. I'm going to do this every single time. So, but Director Van Wright, thank you very much for the presentation. Deputy Director, thank you again. Yeah, really important stuff, and really appreciate all the work you guys have put into this. So, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And we'll be bringing a few more things in the next couple months on this as it progresses. So we appreciate council's feedback, and we'll move forward.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, everyone, we're just moving on to reports from boards and commissions. Anyone have anything to report tonight? I don't see any lights. Member Ward, did you have something?
Yeah, just a couple of things that I deferred from the last session. Probably the biggest one was the Region 9 Opioid Abatement Task Force, still ongoing, trying to decide how we spend or allocate the funds that have come in for this current 2-year cycle. There's a September deadline, and we need to get RFPs out if we're allocating additional funds. So we had a pretty good meeting. It was on March 14th, and those meetings continue. I have taken over for Gretchen Ryden as the Tri-Cities representative for Region 9. Not a lot of stuff for me to do because I did not take a seat as chair or vice chair. I deferred to the Mayor Pro Tem in Aurora, or former Mayor Pro Tem, I should say, whose name is escaping me at the moment, Francoise. She'll be chairing the committee going forward into the next 2-year cycle. I think that's the only substantive update that I have on boards and commissions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Member Ward. Member Prang?
Thank you. Just really quickly from Parks and Rec, as you or maybe don't know, our last meeting was canceled due to our last weather event. But we did receive some updates. It looks like we're looking for seasonal workers for Pirates Cove, Bellevue Farm, Broken Tee Golf Course, and there's information available on our city website for those. And then a few quick updates on Bates Logan, phase 1 and 2 renovations. We will be anticipating the opening of the restroom and shelters on April 15th as scheduled. And early April, it looks like the construction for new playground and basketball court are going to be underway. That's all I have.
Thank you, Member Prang. Did you have something else, Mayor Pro Tem? I thought I saw your light, but okay. All right. And I guess we will move on to council member's choice. Who wants to start us off? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I heard from the folks at the Inglewood Depot, and they are seeking a grant from the state historical fund that will allow them to rehabilitate the library and passageway, as well as allow ADA access and replaster and carpentry throughout the whole main space of the floor of the building. They asked me if I would write a letter of support, which I'm happy to do, but I thought it would be stronger if it came from council. I wanted to see if we had support from council for doing this update or for writing the letter for support for their update on their building.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd be happy to, as a council, I'll be happy to be a signer on that document as well. I think that since last year, I think they've been in compliance with everything that we've asked of them. So I would be in favor of supporting them to the end goal of what we want for the depot. So yeah, I'd be fine with that. Anyone else want to chime in on this? Member Newnenkamp?
I don't have any objection to that, and I think it'd be nice if the whole council was able to sign on.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Anyone not in agreement? Go ahead, Member Wright.
What entryway are they looking at? Are they looking at opening the big entry? Oh, I'm sorry. Are they looking at opening the big entryway again or from underneath the parking?
This is for the main level. It says the library passageway room, so that's on the upper level of the main. It's the main building. They're not talking about opening it up right now. This is just one step in rehabbing the building and bringing it up to codes that they could open eventually.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right. Don't see any objection, at least. Oh, go ahead, Member Ward. Not on this subject. Okay. Anything else, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I just what does staff need from me to help this along? I drafted a letter for myself, but is this something that staff wants to write up and have the mayor sign, or how does that? Do we need to pass a resolution? I don't know what the appropriate step for this is.
Well, unless the city attorney disagrees, I think we have four folks who would sign on to it. So we'll draft that for the mayor. And in full disclosure, staff is often requested for letters of support for grants. If those fit into something in the strategic plan, or in this case, the settlement agreement that was reached, we provide those letters of support. So my office has actually already done a letter for the depot, but glad to write one for the mayor's signature as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Member Ward, go ahead.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the meeting that we had last Tuesday. It was a community meeting with regards to Movement 5280, specifically the people who reside in the neighborhood surrounding Movement 5280. First of all, I wanted to say Manager Lewis facilitated that meeting himself directly, and I thought that he did a bang-up job taking some of the heat from the neighbors that have some heartburn over what's going on over there. As I listened to the meeting and listened to the concerns of the neighbors, I think there are some somewhat valid concerns there, and I'm looking forward to reaching a place where we can have some more peaceful coexistence between the neighbors and the organization. I'm not sure that all of the neighbors who live in the neighborhood are there. And I'm hoping that the mediation process will improve conditions there. That being said, I'll note that I haven't talked to any of the representatives from Movement 5280 yet, but I did hear some concerning things at that meeting. One of the things that concerns me is the city's stance is that Movement 5280 is a religious institution or a house of worship. And in our code, we have some provisions for religious institutions and houses of worship. Generally speaking, those are protected under federal law. And so we can't zone certain behaviors out of those areas if they're classified as a house of worship. My concern here is mostly stemming from the fact that they opened using a significant amount of county ARPA dollars. And I can't reason through the connection between us providing them with a religious exemption because they're a church and them accepting over $1 million in county funding. As I understand it, generally speaking, governments don't fund religious institutions. So there's, in my mind, a bit of a disconnect there. It seems very binary to me. Either you're a house of worship and you don't accept government money, or you are something other than a house of worship and you do accept government money. And I have a request in to the city attorney and to staff to kind of clarify that a little bit. I also spoke briefly with Commissioner Warren Gully, who talked to me about what the county money was assigned for. And the county money was earmarked for affordable housing, which, as we know, isn't an allowable use for the Movement 5280 facility where it's located right now. So I don't know what the path forward is exactly. I think we're on a good path as far as working with the two groups to try to secure some peace for the neighborhood and maybe come to a mutual understanding of what the future looks like for both groups. But I'm still having trouble squaring this situation in my mind of what the allowable use is in the area, what the funds were allocated for, and what they're actually being used for. So that's the situation as I see it, and as best as I can sum up the most recent community meeting. I intend to monitor the situation going forward. I know I'm fishing off the mayor's pier to a certain extent here. I believe that's in District 1, unless I'm mistaken. But I have had some concerns raised in some of the boards that I sit on with the residents who attend those boards. So that's how I became involved in this.
Thank you so much, Member Ward, and I believe that there is a council request for that item, so I appreciate that. And anyone else for Member Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. And I actually pulled out the council policy manual today when I was reading, because this whole thing with the mayor's or with the judge's salary is just the fact that it's dragging on. In the policy manual, in the council policy manual, this is what it says: municipal court judge / municipal court budgetary review. The municipal court judge of the city of Inglewood, as an elected official, shall meet annually with the city council to discuss budgetary matters for the municipal court. The municipal court judge, in coordination with the city manager and the Human Resources Department, shall conduct an annual salary survey of similar highest-ranking judge of courts of comparable operations located within the Denver metropolitan area. The municipal court judge shall provide the list of comparables to the city manager and Human Resources for completion of the survey. The city council shall annually determine the appropriate compensation for the municipal court judge by resolution after consideration of the annual survey, but prior to the end of the calendar year. The municipal court judge shall be invited to participate in any such discussions, which shall take place in open session. And I guess my question is to the city attorney: do we have legal liability for not following our own policy?
No, there's no legal liability there. It's not the law. This is just a procedure that I understand council had agreed to follow with the prior municipal judge. The current municipal judge shared that with Sean and I during a recent meeting. So it doesn't create liability. However, when we did table it, I had mentioned that if there is a salary increase, that it be retroactive to January 1, because I think that does comport with the intent of the policy, that it would go into effect at the beginning of the year. But that is assuming there is an authorized salary increase by resolution.
And so apparently we did approve the budget, which included a salary increase for the judge. And I guess as a community, the real penalty is probably public trust. I do think there's some concern in the public that we're not dealing with this. Do we have any idea when it is going to be on the agenda?
Thank you, Member Russell. I do not. I think we're still waiting on the information that the judge said that he was going to provide. So I can reach back out. I did have a meeting with them a couple weeks back, but and it was a good meeting. I'm just waiting to hear back from the information that I believe a majority of council has asked for. So,
okay, thank you. I just wanted for us to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Member Russell. Member Ward, anything to add or?
Yeah, I'll just note that I don't recall the last time we saw the municipal judge. We saw the court administrator, but we didn't see the municipal judge. He hasn't come. It's been, unless I'm wrong, over a year since we've met personally as a body in a meeting with the judge.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Wright, anything else on council member's choice?
Yes, please. I recall the judge here given at a study session, just to add, it was less than a year ago. But what I have is, I recall a while ago that council had approved to set up a fund to do help residents in flood proofing grants, and flooding season is right around the corner. So I didn't know how residents could reach out to the city and apply for those grants and that type of stuff, how it's being communicated out. I have a few people in my area whose houses like to flood. And I told them about it, but I didn't know how they could reach out and apply for these grants. So I was curious how we, can let people know how they could reach out and where they apply for these.
Thank you for the question, Member Wright. That was actually the only topic on my report tonight, is to say that we have just launched the Residential Flood Mitigation Grant. It just went live on the city's website. It's currently located under City Departments, Public Works, and then the Residential Flood Mitigation Grant. This grant is really, and it goes back, I believe, a year and a half to 2 years. The exact details are on the website, but retroactive for people who, for instance, built a curb around a basement stairwell to keep water out, someone who increased the height of their window wells, anything that that was discussed with and approved by Public Works and done, and it can be done retroactively. They can give that approval. We can reimburse for. We've been working on that for a number of months, just trying to figure out what would be best to help residents there, going back and forth on, does it have to be a licensed contractor? So we have landed on, for major work, it does need to be a licensed contractor, but for minor work, it could be, a homeowner can do some of that work themselves, as long as it's approved by Public Works.
Okay. And will the city, if they don't know what to do to prevent flooding, will someone from the city help them look at, this house just sits in a valley. It's basically what it is, and they keep flooding.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little precarious for the city to be advising a private property owner on how to best prevent flooding. I think what we have committed to do is meeting with anyone who's looking at projects, and making sure that they are being, particularly for major work, that they are being guided by someone who's licensed to do that kind of work. But we are, I think, happy to meet with owners with regard to, smaller, minor projects that Public Works can verify would be helpful in a flood event. And I should also mention that this only applies to areas that have known flooding issues or are in a floodplain. So there are a number of areas that we've gotten reports on flooding, and those are in that qualified area, but it is not for the whole city.
Anything else, Member Wright? All right, Member Pring?
Thank you. I'd just like to come back to the question of the judge's salary.
Actually, Member Prang, I'm being very careful just because since it's not really on the agenda, I don't want to make a topic of the judge's salary tonight.
Yeah, so I didn't want to dig into conversation just procedurally.
Okay, go ahead.
That I understand as a new council member. So it sounds to me like we approve a certain amount potential increase in the budget each year.
Correct.
And it also sounds to me like the norm is in the process that the judge would come before us and provide some form of information.
Correct.
Prior to us doing like a final authorization of giving that salary. Am I correct in that?
Correct. It's a two-step process.
Okay.
Normally a three-step process because there's the judge meets with us every year around budget season, around May timeframe or so, to go over the budgetary requirements of, for the following year. Last year was the first year that I remember that we approved the budget normally in September, October timeframe, right? Last year we had the judge come in front of us in December, or scheduled to come in front of us in December, and that's when the court administrator came. So there was a little bit of change in the process, and then I guess the fourth step of the process is that we always vote to approve the judge's salary. So there is those steps that we normally follow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Prang. Member Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. I had two other things that I forgot. So if there's been an illegal dump, I got a call from a constituent today. Somebody dumped a couch in the alley and it's been shoved up against their fence. And is the city taking care of that for people? Did they take care of yours?
No, I had a neighbor. I had the same thing happen to a neighbor. City Manager Lewis, did you want to answer this? Because this just happened recently. If not, I could provide a response because I remember what my neighbor told me, so.
I'll go after you.
Okay, so the city doesn't handle the waste that's dropped off by whoever. The city does provide a reimbursement of $50 so that to one of the waste utility. I think my neighbor used Waste Management. It's $50 total that they could get reimbursed from the city once they pay a waste management company to take care of it.
So could they get like we used to get coupons for the transfer station. Is it something like that? Is it something along those lines or?
Well, the mayor did an excellent job of answering the question. I was trying to find the exact details, but it's not a coupon per se. It's a reimbursement program. And so I'll be glad to enter that as a council request and get the exact details.
Okay.
And it's through code enforcement as well.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So you do need to report it as an illegal dump, and then we will reimburse the costs of cleanup. There is one exception that we have made just as an administrative policy, and that is if it is imminently threatening a water inlet that is part of a storm conveyance system, Public Works will go out, but that's really the only circumstance that we will expend city resources on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then I met with a couple today that live in one of the buildings over by Swedish Hospital. And I think it's a for ownership, it's probably condos. The safety of the pedestrians along the corridor there, because, coming off of Hampton, there by Caribou Coffee, and it's really fast there. If the light happens to be green at Downing, then the traffic, it is sometimes almost impossible for pedestrians to safely cross. And it would be Corona and Old Hampton. Are we looking at pedestrian crosswalks anywhere in that area, or are we doing anything in conjunction with the Complete Streets?
Is Corona east or west of Downing?
It's west of Downing,
Okay.
1 block.
Go ahead, City Manager Lewis.
Thank you for the question. I'll have to look at the exact limits of the project. Member Newnenkamp is on one of the steering committees with EDDA on that and may know more than I can recall.
Yes, on the design committee, which includes residents and hospital representatives and others, there were lots of discussions around where the crosswalks should go. So that hasn't been fully decided yet, but that is part of the conversation. And also the entire purpose of Complete Streets is to slow the traffic and to make it more accessible for pedestrians. So that is why I'm so supportive of it, because I do think that traffic needs to be addressed there.
Thank you. And then just one other question, and this may be a council request. Is it possible for the building to get like a loading zone where there's apparently a lot of trucks, like Amazon and delivery trucks, things like that. But also there are a few handicapped people in that building. And is it possible, how would they come to the city to apply for a loading zone? Just maybe a couple spaces in front of the building. So if we could do a council request on that, that would be good.
Okay, sounds
Thank
good,
you.
Member Russell. Thank you. Member Ward.
With my apologies, Mayor, just one more word of clarification on the municipal judge issue. The municipal judge did appear, it's come to my attention, on May 8th of last year to present to council, but there was very little discussion on the municipal court budget in that particular session. I did bring up some questions at the time. I believe the response I received was something along the lines of, we'll come back at a later date to discuss that further. And I believe that was the last time this body has seen the municipal judge in person as a body. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ward. Anyone else with council members' choice? Oh, go, no. All right. City Manager Lewis, do you have anything else to add on City Manager's choice?
Just on the same topic I mentioned before, I am sending out council a link to the new residential flood mitigation grant program. We'd love for you to forward that to residents that you know have experienced flooding in the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. All right, everyone. Our meeting is now adjourned. It is 7:50. See you all next Monday. Have a good evening.